Recognized to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered base text for the purposes of amendment. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas to explain the amendment.
This amendment, this amendment amends the relevant statutory sections to which this bill applies, including the mandatory detention statute, expedited removal statute, and withholding of removal statute. The amendment also defines criminal gang, applies the bill's provisions to members of transnational criminal organizations, adds a severability clause, and makes applicable aliens ineligible for all immigration benefits and relief. The amendment makes technical and conforming changes throughout the existing statute. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
Go to Ms. Jayapal. Even though it was a tie on the hands in the air, I'll go with the lady.
He's just keeping me from our CPC meeting, but that's fine.
And me too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong opposition to this bill, and I think the ranking member laid out the severity of the situation very, very clearly. This bill gives the Secretary of Homeland Security nearly limitless discretion to label any non-citizen as a terrorist or a gang member and subject non-green card holders to a lightning-fast removal proceeding before not an impartial judge, but before a DHS official. And I was just looking at my phone and saw a story of these mass deportations, rapid deportations that are happening, and a story of somebody in New York, a woman who was illegally deported, and they left her 2-year-old child behind. And this was because she was deported in 4 days. All of the process was essentially waived. That is what this administration is doing. They have falsely accused countless innocent people of being gang members and terrorists, and they are using that label as an excuse to ship them off to torture chambers and even killing them. I'm just disgusted that the majority has looked at this abysmal record and decided that what the administration needs is not less power and more oversight, but actually more power to continue to do this. We should be conducting oversight on the Trump administration's abuse of authority and attempts to take over cities across the country in the name of immigration enforcement. Last month in Chicago, I led 18 of my colleagues to conduct the largest act of congressional immigration oversight since Trump took office. And what we heard in Chicago was absolutely devastating. People of all statuses who were terrorized by Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino and rogue immigration officials across Chicagoland. And the day after our shadow hearing, Bovino actually deployed tear gas in a residential neighborhood as children were gathering for a Halloween parade. In the words of a federal judge, quote, "These kids, their sense of safety was shattered, and it's going to take a long time for that to come back," end quote. That same weekend, Border Patrol agents dragged a 67-year-old U.S. citizen from his car, breaking 6 of his ribs, while children in Halloween costumes were watching in horror. And you know what? His crime was turning down a street to get home. He never resisted. In another incident, Bovino, the head of CBP, admitted to lying about whether a rock hit him before he deployed tear gas. We also heard from an active duty service member risking his life for his country. His father, he flew back to this country because his father was kidnapped. By the time he got back here, his father had been deported. This is a guy who's serving our country, and he said, how is it possible that I'm giving my life for this country and they're deporting my father who did absolutely nothing wrong? Another 19-year-old U.S. citizen forced to take on her mother's business and care for her younger sibling following her mother's detainment. And folks may remember the militarized raid on an apartment building in the dead of the night that resulted in U.S. citizens, many of them African Americans, dragged out of bed, children, some naked, zip-tied, and detained for hours. And the Trump administration was claiming that this building was, quote, filled with Tren de Aragua gang members and said that they captured 2 confirmed gang members. Stephen Miller claimed that it was, quote, one of the most successful law enforcement operations we've seen in the country. And yet, a month and a half later, prosecutors have not filed a single criminal charge against anyone who was arrested, nor have they revealed any evidence that showed that anyone actually belonged to a gang. In fact, many of those that were arrested in the raid were granted voluntary departure, and that would not have happened if they were a serious threat. For any federal agents who are watching this, remember that you swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This conduct that we're seeing does not hold up with that oath, and we are going to hold you accountable. Everyone that is involved in this absolute travesty and violation of justice. And I want to thank Representatives Chuy Garcia and Delia Ramirez, who helped me put this on, as well as Representatives Mary Gay Scanlon, Becca Ballant, Sidney Kamlager-Dove, and Jasmine Crockett for coming to Chicago, along with many other colleagues. This is not normal, and we should be standing up to actually uphold the laws of this country. I urge Republican colleagues to join us and vote no on this. Mr. Chairman, I also seek a unanimous consent
Gentleman may make your request.
to enter into the record the following articles from ABC. Chicago's children are getting caught in the chaos of immigration crackdowns.
Without objection.
From the Washington Post, suburban Chicago dad headed to store with toddler says they were pepper sprayed by federal agents.
Without objection.
From the Chicago Sun-Times, feds deployed tear gas on the far southeast side even after cops told them they had no gas masks.
Without objection.
From The Guardian, Chicago daycare worker freed from judge rules ICE arrest unlawful.
Without objection.
From The Independent, U.S. citizen 67 has ribs broken by Border Patrol agents after being dragged out of car while driving home into street they'd blocked off.
Without objection.
From ProPublica, I lost everything. Venezuelans were rounded up in a dramatic midnight raid but never charged with a crime.
Without objection.
From the Chicago Tribune, U.S. citizens racially profiled by immigration agents in Chicago, quote, I felt like a piece of trash.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from, excuse me, from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind the committee that administrative removal is already on the books right now. All this law does is simply expand the categories under which an illegal alien can be deportable via administrative removal. In fact, administrative removal was used 13,000 times by President Obama, over 12,000 times under President Biden. Were those deportations a violation of due process?
Would the gentleman yield?
And no, I will not. And if we want to talk about due process, as my colleagues would like to, where was the due process for Rachel Morin, who was slaughtered by an illegal alien? Where was the due process for Kayla Hamilton, who was slaughtered by an illegal alien? What about Laken Riley or Jocelyn Nungary? Where was the due process for them? Where was the outrage when the last administration ushered into our communities Tren de Aragua gang members, MS-13 cartel members, and terrorists from around the world? I think that the American people can see that Democrats reserve their tears for illegal aliens who break our laws and victimize our communities. But if we want to talk about due process, let's talk about due process. Federal courts of appeals have routinely upheld this law's administrative removal procedures as they have existed for the last 30 years. In fact, every federal court of appeals to consider the constitutionality of the expedited removal procedures under Section 238 of the Immigration and Nationality Act has held that the statute comports with due process. Nearly 3 decades ago, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit held that, quote, clearly the expedited statutory deportation scheme comports with the minimum requirements of due process pronounced by the Supreme Court. The Fifth Circuit outlined the due process requirements, quote, that an alien be provided notice of the charges against him, a hearing before an executive or administrative tribunal, and a fair opportunity to be heard, end quote. all of which this statute satisfies and did satisfy. As recently as this past July, the Fifth Circuit reiterated that holding, as have the U.S. Courts of Appeals for the 4th, 6th, 9th, 10th, and 11th Circuits. Democrats' fear-mongering contradicts the law, contravenes the text of the bill, and undermines efforts to ensure that dangerous illegal aliens can be quickly removed from the United States. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word. I'm recognized. Thank you.
Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate some of what my colleague from Texas discussed in his long soliloquy to begin the introduction of this bill. And I agree very wholeheartedly that our asylum system is broken. And I agree very much that it takes far, far too long to adjudicate asylum claims. That was actually corrected in the Senate's bipartisan immigration bill that Senator Lankford and Senator Murphy and Senator Sinema had agreed upon at the very beginning of 2024. Unfortunately, Donald Trump intervened to submarine that bill because he didn't want Joe Biden to get a win. So now my colleagues on the other side of the aisle continue to complain about the asylum system and continue to introduce these expedited removal statutes and bills to account for the fact that asylum processes can take 7-8 years. That bill put it at 6 months. 6 months. And so yet here we are with another bill for expedited removal without any due process. And it almost feels like this is two completely separate bills mixed into one. And I think I know why. Because there are 3 categories of aliens, as it says here, who are subject to expedited removal. First is a member of a criminal gang or a criminal organization, as determined by the Secretary of Homeland Security. Not a judge, not an independent adjudicator, the Secretary of Homeland Security. The second is a member of an organization designated as a foreign terrorist organization pursuant to or has provided material support to such an organization. Again, as determined by the Secretary of Homeland Security. The third is someone who's been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor against a vulnerable group. Well, that is totally different. A conviction, of course, requires due process. So I know where this is going. We, on the Democratic side, are going to oppose this because we've already seen, this is not hypothetical, we've seen the type of people that the Secretary of Homeland, the type of evidence that the Secretary of Homeland Security uses to determine someone to be a member of a gang. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, as we all remember, was whisked away to CICOT in El Salvador, where we now have numerous prisoners who said that they were tortured because he was allegedly a gang member because of tattoos that he had. That, I guess, is how we determine whether someone is a gang member. And so what we're going to hear is, obviously, this is preposterous to allow the Secretary of Homeland Security to make these determinations with full discretion, without any review, without any independent arbiter, to determine whether the evidence meets that. I mean, this is fundamental due process. I know my Republican colleagues would not possibly support Alejandro Mayorkas from making these decisions. There's no possible way. But what we're going to now hear is, the Democrats are against deporting convicted felons against children. That's going to be your talking point. Just like your talking point is still that the shutdown was about providing health care to illegal aliens when that's been debunked over and over and over again. So if you want to work on our immigration system, you want to fix our asylum system so that we don't have 80% of applicants be denied, but they've been here for 7 years, creating a tremendous pull, I am with you. Let's do it. But don't bring expedited removal for someone that the Secretary of Homeland Security alleges and determines on her own is a member of a terrorist organization. Those people should be deported, but they should have due process. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.